We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Dan. I'm with SCORE Maine. SCORE provides small business mentoring and workshops. We do workshops just like this one, and we also provide one-on-one mentoring for small businesses. This is the third in a three-part series on starting a food truck or mobile unit. And I want to say thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We have Nancy from the Greeks of Peaks and Rue from the Pink Waffle. And Nancy, if you don't mind getting us started today and just doing a little introduction and telling us a little bit about why you wanted to start a food truck.
Yeah, I'm Nancy Clusteridis. I have been running Greeks of Peaks since around 2016-17. This is our 6th or 7th year in operation. We've been at Fork Food Lab the entire time. I had worked in kitchens most of my life, all of my life pretty much, and I took a little break in between and was a school teacher for a moment. And I just knew that I always wanted to go back to cooking. So when I was starting to get back into the industry, I was thinking about things like, hours of operation and how much I wanted to go back on a line, or if I wanted to go back on a line. And after really looking at all my options, I decided that I wanted to work for myself and I wanted to cook my family's food. And I wanted it to be on my own terms. So that's why I started Greeks of Peaks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy. And we'll go on over to Rue. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the Pink Waffle and why you decided to get started?
Yeah, definitely. My name is Rue. I'm the owner operator of the Pink Waffle food truck. We just wrapped up our third season, I'd say. So we're about like 2.5 years old, but third summer in Maine. I have been working professionally in kitchens for almost 20 years now. The last, say, probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 years now have been mostly spent in management. And it got to a point where I wanted to work for myself. I started writing business plans, see what kind of food I wanted to do. Waffles had always been kind of a theme in my personal life. I used to make them at home a lot. And then also I always would end up on stations during my cooking years that would have waffle irons as well. So it was a nice, theme that I wanted to run with that. And I wrote the business plan for the Pink Waffle, I think the winter of 2019 going into 2020. And at that point, I was kind of wondering if I wanted to do brick or mortar or go and do a food truck. And the pandemic kind of helped me make that decision. So I decided to go with the food truck.
Yeah, thank you, Rue. And thank you both for joining us today. For the audience members that we have with us today, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. You can ask any question you'd like to our panelists here, and they can weigh in on their experience with running a food truck here in Maine. And to get us started, we actually had a few questions from some of the previous sessions and some folks that have emailed in. So I just kind of want to get started with that. And we'll get both of you to weigh in on that. And the first question, Nancy, if you wouldn't mind taking this first, why did you decide to go with a food truck rather than trying to go with brick and mortar? Like, what about a food truck or mobile vending really appealed to you?
Well, I liked the idea of being able to serve different communities. My home is kind of split between Peaks and Portland. And I liked the idea of being able to be in multiple places. Also just hours of operation. When you prep your food, you serve your food, you close the truck. Like, you prep as much as you can, you serve as long as you can, and then it's over. You park it and you walk away. It was also a great way to get started and test recipes, and it requires low employees. It has very little overhead. It was just kind of a win-win in all ways, while I figured out exactly how I wanted to be back in the industry. And then it took hold, and now, we've been doing it for, like 7 years or so, and I've got my menu set. I have a great group of people that work with me. And we've had the opportunity to work all over Southern Maine and do everything from just serving the public to catering weddings and corporate events, and it's been really fun.
Yeah, thank you. And Rue, you kind of touched on this a little bit in your intro, but what about a food truck was more appealing to you than trying to do something like brick and mortar?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I was starting my business during the pandemic, so that kind of helped me move in that direction. But also a big thing was from a financial aspect as well. The stakes are a lot lower with food trucks as opposed to taking on trying to open a restaurant. Nancy mentioned, hours of operation, that sort of thing. We only do business, for maybe 5 days a week. Some people do more, but usually if you have a restaurant, it's kind of the expectation you are open for X amount of days, X amount of hours. And it's also a little lower stakes in the sense that, if, you think you have a pretty good idea and, you're able to get a business loan with your business plan, and you're then able to, I think, test it out with like a little bit lower stakes than with a restaurant. Food trucks is a little lower operation costs, lower overhead, and then less hours of operation. So it's a good way to get started with your idea.
So you actually touched on, thank you for that. You actually kind of touched on one of the next questions or one of the other points that we have here. And that's kind of, you mentioned like business plans and like how it can be very critical for funding. And you kind of talked about it more from like that business aspect. How critical would you say those business skills are in relation to starting up a food truck? Because I think, especially in the restaurant business and in food and beverage, it's definitely a passionate industry, but it's also a low overhead or a rather a thin margin industry. So how important would you say those business skills are?
I think they're pretty important. I don't even know, honestly, if I've ever taken a business class or done anything like, as far as like academia with business. Mine was through a lot of learning. And like I had, been writing business plans for food, business or restaurants, food trucks, whatever, for like years now. And I think it was very important in the critical moments when I had what I thought was a really good business plan for a waffle truck. I took it to my accountant and I said, "Does this seem like it's an all right thing?" And she said, "Yeah, I think so." And then from there, I was had some confidence. I was able to go out and pursue a business loan in order to get things started for my business.
And what would you say, Nancy, in regards to those business skills with a food truck? How important was that for you along your entrepreneurial journey? Oh, you had mute.
Well, I took a different approach to that. It was much more kind of looking at things as they unfolded. I bought the truck. I didn't need it, it was a long time ago and they weren't as expensive. So, I got it pretty cheap. And then I kind of looked at the cost of the food versus, what I could price it at and how to pay the employees. And that's how I started it. And then I realized slowly that I was going to need that business side. So I actually went to places like the CEI Women's Business Center. I went and talked with the SBA. I met with an accountant. Like over time, I added those things on. I would say it is super critical to be able to understand, your taxes and your licensures, and looking at all of those things from a business perspective is incredibly helpful. And moving forward, after I'd say like the first year, I started to have a much stronger plan and looking at, getting QuickBooks and like looking into all of those things. I had been really back of house my whole life and hadn't run the books like Rue had. So I was coming from a completely different area and skill set, more managerial but not books. And yeah, it's pretty critical to understand how because your profit margins are razor thin. When a difference between, they say it's like 33% is like that golden number. When you're looking at everything, employees and wages and food costs, which change all the time, you really have to make sure that you are keeping track.
Trish has had a quick question DM'd to me in the chat here. Do you mind explaining what you mean by the golden number of 33%?
Yeah, it's just one of those things people say in the restaurant industry where it's like, after your food costs, after all the wages, after your overhead, electricity, propane, rent, if you're going brick and mortar, you want to have a 33% like profit area. You want to at the end of the year be looking at that it was like 70% cost, 33% profit is like the general golden number that they say means you aren't going to lose your business. I mean, most people, and I don't know, I'm not going to say most people, a lot of the businesses on a more of a micro scale, like us food trucks, I think we shoot for somewhere around there or maybe closer to 40 if you can squeeze it. It's always better to be a little bit closer to the 40, 60, but yeah, I mean, your first couple of years, 33 is kind of your best case scenario.
It seemed like you agree with that, Rue. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's the number that I remember hearing as well as like 33. Yeah, and it's definitely a goal, I would say. I know like Nancy mentioned, the first couple of years of business is hard, and especially I believe in our industry because of the amount of like physical labor, but also like the back end business part too. So it's like, making sure that we have our menus priced and our food costs up. Like I check my food costs on my recipes probably like 2 or 3 times a year just to touch up, just in case, butter is more expensive or eggs are less expensive now, like that sort of thing, because it does change. And it can change, your menu items price. You got to look at things like, are paper plates more expensive, and so these are things that, like, if you aren't good about keeping an eye on that sort of thing, like I think it would eventually catch up with you, where you'd be like, I didn't have that much of a profit margin this year, and it might be because of just little stuff like that.
I think that actually leads really well into our next question, which is and I think price is one of them that a lot of people struggle with. But what are some of the surprises that you ran into when you were opening your food truck or when you were getting things started that you didn't really account for?
I would say the hardest part is, where do you park? Where are the customers? How are you going to make sure that, sure, you can prep all day, Monday through Thursday, but if you aren't in a space on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday where you are going to be seeing more than 100 people a day, 200 people a day, you aren't going to meet those margins. It's all well and good to be like, pick 10 people a week who want a 20-person catered dinner. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting space where you're going to see a couple hundred people, you just aren't going to meet your goals. And it's, Southern Maine has those spaces, but our season is short, and there are many trucks, and making sure that you build a following and figure out where you are going to be physically located is, I would say, the second step after everything else we've mentioned.
What do you think, Rue? What's one of the biggest challenges that you faced that you weren't really expecting?
I say definitely what Nancy said. For me, I was starting a waffle food truck, so I think I had an idea of what I was going to do for business and for food, and that quickly changed. Like, I thought maybe I'd be like a breakfast food truck. I'd be out, in the morning, and that was like going to be my thing. But turns out I just, gotta, go to do the events, if, or I go and set up at a brewery, or, I do some like, some other time of day. So I think that, I had an idea of what I thought my business would look like, and it's actually completely different from what I had expected. Both like, with, menu items, but also like the type of business that I do too. I thought it'd be a lot more straightforward. But yeah, it's a lot of, we got to make sure we see hundreds of people, during the week, and we have to, know when to say yes to things and when to say no to things. which is pretty important to do, because there's sometimes where you think it might be a good idea to go somewhere, and the sales might not add up to what you needed them to be able to cover for the costs, XYZ. So there's a lot of that. It's very challenging.
Yeah, I thought it was something you mentioned there that I thought was particularly interesting is you have a waffle truck, so breakfast totally makes sense, but you found an audience where you didn't really expect it, and I think that's something that's particularly interesting and not something that I think a lot of brick and mortar locations might experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's definitely helped me shape my menu and more of like an all day kind of an appeal, as opposed to just doing breakfast stuff. So like I have things you can definitely have in the morning. I serve coffee as well. I usually do that if I'm doing morning things, not so much in the afternoon, because I know most people want it in the morning instead. So there's like little adjustments that I make to kind of fit the event, and it's different from like writing a different menu for each event. It's more of like okay, this one's during the day, there's going to be a lot of kids at this event, so like I make and serve ice cream. So I'm like, okay, I'll make sure to stock up on ice cream if it's a hot day. If it's a cold day, make more hot chocolate, something like that.
And so that actually leads into another one of our pre-submitted questions, and I do want to remind our audience here that they're more than happy to put something in the chat. We just had something come through here, or the Q&A panel. But how much does weather affect you as a food truck? I'm assuming that's a pretty loaded question.
Deeply.
Yes.
Very, very deeply. If it's raining, people are not outside. I mean, it rained all summer, and every single one of us felt that intensely. You could call up any of the trucks. It has been a really hard summer for us. We ended up changing up a lot of different things because of the weather. We started doing more delivery, more catering pickups, just really anything that could diversify the large, well, not diversify, but anything that could add on to the larger events that we had planned. You have to be super, super adaptable. You have to also think about food loss, food storage, and food, your ability for your food to last long. Because if your event gets rained out and you prepped, $500 worth of food to sell to 300 people, and that event is canceled, there's a huge loss, not just in cost, but in what you were going to make. And so thinking about your menu in terms of longevity is really important. You don't want to lose freshness. You don't want to lose your access to, good, like, vegetables or things that are going to make it what it is. You're not going to stop the integrity of your menu, but you need to think about, okay, if this does get canceled, what can be frozen? What can be reused? How can I now shift focus really fast to get this food sold?
What weather challenges have you encountered this year, Rue?
For me, it's also what Nancy said. Yeah, it's been hard because it's been raining so much. So it's definitely affected sales and out people coming out for events and whatnot. Also, it makes weather, makes our jobs a little harder too. Just like, if it is downpouring, raining, if you're going out to an event, if the event's 4 hours, you got like maybe an hour or two before, an hour or two after the event that you still have to do stuff. So you got to think about, how are you going to dress that day? Is your staff going to be working the full shift, or is it going to be slow? We're going to have to like let people go home early. If you run generators, like, do we have stuff to cover the generators to make sure that everything can run okay during this? And then also, location as well. So, if it's raining and muddy, you probably don't want to be somewhere where, parked, also like trying to get your vehicle into a precarious spot. There's a lot to think about. And then whether or not if you do end up canceling, or like having to take a hit on sales, how to make up for it, saving the product, freezing it, etc.
Yeah, thank you. And it looks like our panelist from Ironclad has joined us. Welcome. Would you mind just giving us a short introduction and kind of telling us a little bit about Ironclad?
Sure. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm Steph. I am one of the owners of Ironclad Eats. We are a taco truck that has been based out of Portland since 2021. So this is our third season. This season we added a trailer, so we now have two vehicles. So we've had lots of things to learn this year, lots of growth. We moved into Fork Food Lab this year, so we have aggressively scaled our business up. And it's, as I hear everybody else saying, this year was, of all 3 years, this year's been a little challenging because I think expectations versus reality and the weather and other factors made it really a year where you had to use that nimbleness to be successful and stay afloat.
Speaking of, would you mind telling us a little bit about how the weather has impacted you this year and any suggestions or advice that you might give to someone looking into starting up a food truck in regards to weather-related challenges?
Yeah, I mean, we operate almost all the time. We operate really a long season, partially because we're crazy. It's not for everybody and it's a hustle. But during the rain, for example, we tend to always stay out unless it gets very dangerous, but we keep a very close eye on the weather and the radar. We do find that operating in the rainy weather is you usually do all right. All things considered, it's not as bad as we think. We have QR codes on our menus now. So when people are inside, they can scan our menus. It prints out right at the truck and it texts people when their orders are ready. You know, sometimes my husband's been in the breweries with a handheld device. You know, make it easy for your customers to place the order, because part of it is getting people outside to stand in line in the rain is a challenge. And if you can remove that obstacle, you can see a higher conversion rate.
I think that's a great piece of advice. We have a few questions that have rolled in, so I want to start addressing them. We have one from Harry. And Harry's question is, are there any legal entities or maybe an association or group for food truck owners to participate in to help move the needle on legislation? He specifically mentions how difficult it's been with the Eastern Prom and getting a foothold there as far as a food business goes. Do you guys have anything in that regard?
So there's a very fiery group chat if you'd like to sign up for that. There was this collective called the Hunger Collective that was started back in, I don't know, I'd say 2015 or so, that the old food trucks were all a part of, kind of fizzled out. It's hard when people are just operating like, you know, in that short season. And back then, people weren't going year round. There has been a lot of talk this year because things have really, really changed now, not only with City of Portland making just wild decisions without speaking with our community in any way, but also every township is now requiring you to get your own permit and also get inspected by their inspectors, which are already a part of DHHS, which you get an inspection from the state anyway. So I don't know where it's heading. I do know that it is challenging when you need to buy Portland, South Portland, Westbrook, Gorham, Freeport, Yarmouth, Falmouth. Like, they all have decided recently that they want their money. And if you are going to operate there, they all have like little different things like, oh, if it's more than 5 days, you buy this one. Oh, if it's less than 60 days, you can buy this one. Or catering versus mobile versus it's very complicated. But that started to change in the last 3 years. It used to just be that you got your Portland and your state and you were good. And now it's everyone. So there does need to be a collective. There does need to be someone who wants to work with legislation and work with city councils. No one has stepped into that role. And I know that there are people kind of asking around to the SBA and to Women's Business Center and CEI, trying to see if anyone's interested in taking on that collective. We've talked about it a lot at Fork Food Lab. It just hasn't gotten off the ground yet.
What's been your experience with kind of like the legislation and the difficulties in finding a spot, Rue?
Yeah, so just finished up the third season, and I have noticed that this year I've had to do a lot more town licenses and see a lot more fire inspectors at the town, which is also difficult because, you know, while we have this short season and we're trying to cram all this work into the short season, you know, right before the short season starts is when all these, you know, towns and, you know, people come knocking to get their money for all this licensing. So, and then it's like, you know, you have to get your rig, you have to make sure that it is all set, you know, everything's working and can be inspected and you'll pass inspection. And yeah, Nancy mentioned that there's like each town kind of has little different things, you know, your license might cost this much, but you can operate this. I got a town license where I had to print out everything for them. I couldn't send anything digitally because that's just how they've always done it and they would not change. And I was like, okay, so I have to mail it or bring it down to town hall myself, you know, amongst, you know, the busy season. Yeah, and I think specifically the city of Portland seems to be, you know, I think putting up a lot of financial barriers for food trucks to be able to set up. Eastern Prom, of course, is the place where people would want to set up their food trucks, and they, you know, have changed where the food trucks set up, and now have put like a much higher price tag on being able to do business there. And then the rest of the city, you know, we have some spots we're able to set up at, but I'm hoping to see a lot more food truck stuff happening in towns outside of Portland. There's been a couple of food truck parks. You know, there's Congdon's down in Wells, Gorham and Westbrook added one this year, and it's been really well received by the communities there. So I'm happy to see that we're able to kind of, you know, find other places instead of having to try to rely on the tourist attraction of the city of Portland specifically.
I think that was a really good answer. And I think something in your answer that I think was a really good point for people to pick up on is the time commitment and the time investment that would also be involved with dealing with all of these different regulations and getting licensed, especially at the start of the busy season.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys have dealt with in Ironclad? What challenges have you had in regards to licensing or regulation?
Similar. This year we had a struggle with, we got a second vehicle, and it was actually Augusta that was held up, and the move into Fort Food, and our trailer application took 100 business days to be processed through Augusta. But we have found that having a really good, so one, when you think you're ready to get started, get all your shit together, all your paperwork, and like as soon as you can get it to Augusta, like get it to Augusta, because they're bottlenecked really hard this year. There was a lot new food trucks. Even though we existed, we had to treat our second vehicle as if it was brand new. And it was really stressful because you have a big purchase and you're eager to get out there and start. We make good relationships with our health inspectors. So actually we got special permission from the city of Portland to operate our trailer in the city of Portland only. We had to do a little zhuzhing on the schedule to make it work, but we did make it work. And that was because the city of Portland said, we've inspected you and we're granting your license, even though the state hasn't processed you yet. We see no reason why you can't. Also with other municipalities, I sometimes try to work directly with them. I'll tell them if I think they're hurting themselves, like Wyndham's very tricky. Wyndham wants background checks. And we live in Raymond. So like we almost need it in case we operate. We don't even plan to operate, but we have to go through the paperwork. So if an event comes up, we're prepared. Because if not, Wyndham, you actually have to go in front of their board and get approved by a group of people that you can run your business. It's very litigious. But some places that are doing better, like I've noticed Lewiston emailed us and said that they were trying to make it easy for food trucks. They were being very inviting. Please come to Lewiston. They had a whole program. They were waiving fees. Lisbon Falls is waiving fees. So there's a lot of interesting communities that are outside of Portland that I think are sensing these struggles and are they're doing the right thing. Gorham and Westbrook also have economic departments that are advocating to bring businesses in. And the towns that have that, to me now that I'm in our third year, those are more inviting to me. Like I want to go to Gorham because Gorham works for me. Like Gorham wants my business there. They bring the inspector to you. You don't have to schedule a separate appointment or anything. They try to make it as easy as possible. And it's one of those things you either learn through word of mouth or by experience.
I was actually going to say, it sounds like it's almost so granular that it's just you have to run into the problem to know there's a problem.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Uh, to move on to potentially a more bright topic, what Nancy, what has been the most successful way that you found to market your food truck, or what marketing channels have you found to be the best, even one time or long term?
Instagram. It's Instagram. Facebook is really hard to use and not user friendly, and there's not as many people personally. Other people might have a different take on it. Instagram, Google Maps. Put your business on Google Maps. It works. They have a great business tool on Google Maps that I mean, it's so underutilized. Just yeah, getting in partnership with other people who are promoting, getting on there, posting often. But that's really all we use. We use Nextdoor sometimes for like really small communities like Peaks Island, or we find people in the community who are sending out community letters about like what's happening in our town this week. We find those people, we message them, we tell them we're coming. But yeah, we are solely pretty much Instagram focused.
I would say that makes sense. It's a very visually based application.
Oh, and I see that comment about how there's apps. Yeah, the apps are Food Truckalicio and what's the other one?
Clean food trucks.
Yeah, and you tell them, they'll email you, but they also message you on Instagram and they ask for your monthly or weekly schedule, so you can tell them. Yelp does stuff. They can be tricky. Yelp can be tricky. But Yelp Maine is run by a really kind individual who's always just trying to do promotion and on Instagram, but also through their page. So yeah, that's how we do it.
What's been your most successful marketing channel, Rue?
I would also say Instagram. I'm pretty heavy on the Instagram. I technically have a Facebook that I never check, but it's just mostly so I could like post my schedule onto the Facebook page. And I do have people that follow me on Facebook, I guess. They inform me when I meet them. I'm like, oh, good, someone's there. That's good. I did that. And also before I got started, I did a couple pop-ups in Portland too. So that definitely helped me get, and I think the first one I did got picked up by the person who runs the Portland food map. So the first pop-up I did was actually like pretty busy, much to my dismay, because I was only really planning on feeding my friends and family and not like a whole line of people. But that's what it was. So that I think helped me a little bit, at least, you know, get more followers and stuff. And then I was like kind of able to like bait them in while I was building out the trailer. And, you know, and then once I was able to get started, people were excited because they wanted to try waffles.
And so it sounds like Instagram is very popular. What about Ironclad?
Instagram, but I'll say something different to help give a little variety. We actually started our business with a Kickstarter. I know a lot of people think it sounds like easy money. It's not. We worked our fucking faces off for that money. Like, it was hard. It was a lot of advertising and promotion. But we got a really good like sense of engagement. And I think people who donated to our Kickstarter, we still know 3 years in, like, we remember people like, oh, you donated to our Kickstarter before we had a truck, before we had anything other than an LLC and an idea, really. And it really did create a sort of like this community aspect that we try to build with our customers. And Instagram is a good place, not only for advertising, but for that like customer engagement. We post a lot of funny videos, a lot of like, one of my friends said, your husband's comedy show that sells taco trucks is really funny. It sells tacos is really funny. And it helps just get people, you know, they don't just want to see your food, they want to see you. Because, you know, with the food truck, the chef, owner, cook, everybody is right there in the window. And so people form a personal connection with you as an individual in addition to what you're serving.
I think that's a really good point for marketing is if you're making a brand that's a personal brand, being able to engage with that person when you see them at the business is huge.
Yeah.
So this we had a follow-up question actually to the Google Maps question, or the Google Maps answer that Nancy had. How does Google Maps work with a mobile unit? Do you have to update it whenever you move, or are you not really using like the location-based services for Google Maps?
Um, I used it mostly when it's one location. I have when I use it for my Peaks Island location. We had two food trucks. We do not anymore. One got destroyed by a tree. But that's how I used it there. And I think that that one saw, if it's like, you're going to be at the brewery every Friday or something like that, you can add that in. You can just like set it up as there. You can move them. I haven't played around with moving it because I just reopen the business every time we go back out to Peaks Island. It would get sometimes like 30,000 views a month or 40,000 views a month. I mean, there's a huge, I mean, everyone's on Google Maps. If you need to know where to go, you want to look at what your surroundings are. I know that you can do it. I know that you can open a business. You just kind of click to add. I don't know if you guys over at Ironclad have used it that much for moving around, but
I just posted our address on Google as 666 changes daily, check social media.
right, yeah, it's like they check things if you want to like change hours, but it's just another way for people to Google you, or you to put yourself somewhere on the map in the general region you're going to be in. You can even add yourself to your commercial kitchen so that you pop up and it says, check our Instagram, here's our number, here's our email. It's just another way for people to find you.
And so kind of like to wrap back into kind of something else that I think everyone's touched on a little bit so far, breweries. How do you actually make those connections? What does that relationship look like? And like if you were to like walk us through working with a brewery, how have you done it so far?
I think I work with the breweries the most, so I can start this one off. Most of our work from the very beginning of our business has been almost exclusively breweries. We only ever parked at the Eastern Prom once ever. It was a business decision we made for a couple reasons. One of it is that at the breweries, you got a parking spot usually. You don't have to find one. It's available on the lot. And that takes a lot of stress off of the day-to-day operations. And the way we made those relationships was, again, through Instagram. When we started our business, we made a spreadsheet of like an absurd amount of breweries in the area. And we personally sent a personalized email to every single one, introducing us, what our plan was, and asking if they had any room in the upcoming season for us. We got an overwhelming response. We operate primarily our one vehicle out of Bellflower Brewing. It happened that Bellflower opened right about the same time we opened, and we went there. We showed up and met the owners and had a meeting. And it's little things like that. You can wait for the breweries to message you. Sometimes the breweries want food trucks. They know it's food trucks there. I mean, people are going to come, people are going to stay. But if you have a brewery you want to go to, reach out directly, introduce yourselves and ask them, and be willing your first year. You're not going to get Saturdays and Sundays because there's established businesses. We didn't get Saturdays and Sundays at Bellflower, even our first year, even with having that meeting. You have to it's a little bit of a pay your due, I think, at some of the hot breweries with midweek. But now the more people that go to the breweries midweek, I think we can start to get the customers to be like, oh, I can go on a Thursday to Austin Street because I know Great Wave Sushi is going to be there. I know we've worked with the breweries a lot since we do so many events with them to try to say, a stable schedule, I think, is good. There's the fun thing about the food trucks hopping around, but we're finding with our customers, they're looking more for like, we know that Ironclad's at Bellflower for Taco Tuesday every Tuesday. And it was a struggle in the beginning of the season because people weren't used to trucks being at the breweries on Tuesday. So we had to train our customers through marketing, through promotions, through special menu items to come. And now we've actually turned what we thought was going to be a really dud day into a pretty, for Tuesday, a pretty good, successful little day for us.
That's actually a really good kind of rolling into another question that we had. and it's how do you, so everyone understands, like, you go to Eastern Prom, or you might stumble across a food truck in a downtown or something like that, and it's usually those weekend days, or that's like the typical food truck interaction. But as Nancy mentioned earlier, and I know Nancy mentioned catering earlier, and I know the Pink Waffle has some really good waffles that you can get kind of frozen at Fork as kind of a prepared food. What are some other revenue streams that you've kind of tried to work with, or tried to expand into, and how important are those to running your business? You want to start off, Nancy, with catering?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll say that we started the same way. We did breweries our first 3 years, and we they started changing a lot. They started adding, like Rising Tide was all of a sudden like, we have a dedicated food truck. It's hard for them to book us all when some people want this and some people want that, and it is a give and take, and it is a little pay your dues. We noticed pretty quickly that we wanted to be in at Thompson's Point. We wanted to be in at places that we knew there'd be a lot of people. So we started after year 3, kind of reaching out to bigger venues, trying things like the food truck park down in Wells, corporate events. So yeah, we started changing it up at year 3. We just cold emailed people. We looked at really large organizations like WEX, Scarborough medical offices, office parks where there were 10 or 15 businesses and no food, offered to do a food truck Friday morning, food truck Fridays once or twice a month, farmers markets, just found the emails, found the Instagrams and messaged them. And then you're there, you're meeting people, you're talking to them, have your cards ready. People will just come up and ask, will you deliver food to a family dinner of this amount? Do you do catering for weddings? Do you do, so it's adding on all sorts of little things here and there until you find kind of what's going to work for you and your food. We've changed it up more times than I can count. This summer was completely different from last summer, which was completely different from the summer before. It changes every year, but that's part of food trucks. It's like, if you wanted a brick and mortar, if you wanted that 9 to 5, that's what you would do. You have to be adaptable, and you have to be ready to sell yourself, and you have to be ready to not, you know what I mean? Like, you have to be ready to sell your business, and you've got to hustle for it. And I think that's what we all do.
Have you found, like, doing things like catering or those kind of other revenue sources to be, like, very helpful for your business, or would you rather do more of those, less of those?
Yeah, we slowly kind of transitioned more in that realm. We called it, we come when we're called. We do not really open just randomly to the public anymore, because we can't count on those sales. We can't like monetize them and know, we're almost like a zero waste food truck. We work really hard to bring the right amount of food, to prep the right amount of food, and to not have anything left over. We love that. We can project on that. We can know how many people to hire. We can know what our goals are for our revenue and our, what we're actually going to make at the end of the year, what we're trying to save for, and where our business is going. So we, we'll look at a month and we'll be like, okay, like, we know we have this, this, and this. We need to add on 3 business park lunch schedule, like lunch dates. We need to add on, we need to accept 3 or 4 catering requests to get to the numbers that we know we want to hit.
How about the Pink Waffle, Rua? Do you guys, is that kind of frozen waffles or catering? Like, is that a big part of your business? Do you hope to grow that, or?
So I'm currently working on growing the retail side of it. So I did frozen waffles at Fork, and now I'm moving into doing Stroop waffles. So that's been something that has been kind of like on the back burner for me for most of this year, and I've been kind of gearing up, getting ready for the busy season to be able, now that it's fall. I think it was last week I went around and I did some cold emailing to different, local grocery stores, said, hey, I've got the shelf life back on this product. I'm getting the licensing. I want to, have everything costed out. I want to see, set up a meeting and get you to try some, see if you want to buy it. So that is what I am working on now, and that is so that I could have a separate set revenue to be able to continue to do stuff year round. I pretty much am year round, do stuff more under a tent and less in the food truck if it's like pretty cold in the winter. And that's like for a lot of logistic reasons, basically. But yeah, I think I'm hoping that the retail side will be a good just second revenue stream and be able to kind of help stuff along during the winter when I have less events. There's less people out, looking for food trucks out and about. Catering, I have done. I didn't do as much of it this year. I was trying to focus on doing more public stops because my first 2 years, I did a lot of private catering and a lot of big events with colleges. So I wasn't really like out and about in the public, and I always had people being like, "Where are you? I never know where you're set up." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I did this huge event, and so I took this weekend off because I had to lay down." So that, yeah, and like it just kind of changes every year. So this year I'm trying to do the retail side, and I've had less of the big catering, but more of doing a lot more like public stops, being out in the public eye, trying to be more consistent in that manner.
Yeah, thank you. And so Steph, you kind of mentioned how Ironclad has almost created its own secondary revenue lines by kind of working with breweries, but do you do any catering or any secondary revenue sources?
Oh yeah, that was one of the driving factors to us buying the second vehicle actually was it was for two reasons. One was we realized we could only sell so much food out of the War Pig. Our refrigerator's only so big. It's a small truck. So we knew what our cap was on that vehicle, and taking it to events like Thompson's Point, we didn't have enough cold storage and enough grill top space to get tickets out fast enough to capitalize on the money. So when we designed our second trailer, it was designed with the intent of moving large events like Thompson's Point and weddings. We didn't want people waiting, 30 minutes for food at a wedding. So the vehicle is optimized for these like large service hours in a tight amount of time. I don't know if anybody else I wasn't at IDEX days, but we did 600 tacos in 2 minutes, which is crazy. And 2 minutes, 2 hours. It was crazy. And so you do have to be a little strategic when you're doing catering. You have to really understand what your truck is capable of doing, because you don't want to disappoint somebody, especially a bride, on their wedding day. We also are, now that we're in Fork Food, we do have a lot more opportunities for packaging. And so we're going to try this winter to also start working on creating
We are recording. Great.
Ghosts, to start talking about some spice blends, some sauces, things that maybe we can get into local markets, some of our handmade ingredients and stuff like that.
Everyone
And
welcome.
and
Sorry about that.
all good. We also have a merch store. It's a labor of love. We don't get rich selling t-shirts, but we do try to put out special edition shirts for special events that we're doing, something that's timely, holiday stuff. It's good for marketing, and it is good extra little padding on the bank account.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that, Steph. We have 2 more questions I want to try to get through here before the end of our hour is up. So the first one, I think, might be pretty quick. So if you wouldn't mind just weighing in quickly on this one. One of our attendees is looking to possibly put together kind of like a cart or a mini truck for a coffee or beverage business. Do you guys have any advice on challenges or opportunities that you think a beverage business might face in the industry?
Nancy, muted.
You're on mute. Oh, you're on mute, Nancy.
Sorry. Beverages are great. Often with our limited food trucks have such limited space, as we have all discovered and talked about. So beverages are often a last case scenario for us. Like Rue is great. He brings the coffee. Ironclad, I know you guys make sure you've got soft drinks, but again, like, having a beverage truck at events with food trucks is really nice. Your margins are definitely lower. It's going to be something that's probably hands-on for you. And the big thing is space, cooling, and thinking a lot about whether you want a trailer or a truck or just a catering setup, because trucks break down, trailers are hard to drive, and storage is limited. So you have to be really strategic with those bottles.
I think that's a really good answer.
I think there's a market for beverage trucks though. I was just at a campground the other day where like a beverage van came through. The guy did cocktails. It was cool. It was like a big, one of those big like Mercedes vans. And he had it like branded and stuff. Yeah, and he was just rolling out people getting beer and whatnot. So I think that there's definitely a market for it, but I do think that the challenges would be like logistics, keeping stuff cool. I know, if you have, like, I do drip coffee, so it's like easy for me. I just fill up little carafes and I take it with me. But I have a friend who has a coffee truck. And he has an espresso machine in there, and I wanted to ask him about how he runs water, because I know like some things you need to have like water lines run to in order to keep stuff hot, X, Y, and Z. So I think that there's definitely potential for it. Yeah, lower margins though, I would say, than food. But you can also, market yourself to, doing weddings, if you do cocktails, or if you do, mocktails or something, I think there's ways you can market yourself in order to get your name and your product and business out there.
What do you think, Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Spiritually, we would love to have some sort of maple lemonade crazy thing, but logistically, it's too much of a hurdle for us on our vehicles. But I think if somebody was dedicated to that, especially, like weddings and stuff, I tell people park our truck next to the bar cart. It's good for your guests because they can put in their food order, go get their drink. By the time their drink is done, their food is ready. So it pairs really nicely with our businesses. You just have to kind of, get your idea and hone in on it and find the people that want to buy that.
It sounds like there's a place out there for a drink truck. So our last question is another very simple one. And this was kind of back to the Instagram question when we were talking about Instagram earlier. A question from an attendee is, are you running your own Instagram, or did you decide to hire a social media manager for that?
We run it ourselves. It's Canva. Canva, pay for the payment version. It will save you so much time and energy. You don't have to hire somebody to do that. I think it's, what is it, like $99 a year, Rue?
Something like that.
Something like that. It's like it has all the templates. You can upload your logo. It will keep all your projects really organized, and you can literally hit a button that says send to Instagram. It's a no-brainer, and almost all of us use Canva. I think that Ironclad is in a different league because they're social media wizards, and I'm sure you can talk more about that. But Canva, Instagram, yeah.
I run my Instagram myself too, which it definitely there's more stuff. I'm more on Instagram in like the slower months for sure. It's usually like during the season where I'm like, oh no, I didn't like post the schedule yet. I'm like, but thankfully for Canva, it's usually like already on there pretty much as a template, and I can just kind of edit it, and then it's like done in 5 minutes, and then I can post it. I use hashtags, so I save all the same hashtags. I try to keep that pretty consistent as well, so that I'm always popping up in the same places. So I know a little bit about social media, but not so much of an expert, and I wish I had more time for it.
And Steph?
We dedicate a lot of time to social media. It is a driving force in our business from our marketing efforts. Full disclosure, I am a marketing manager by day. So we do employ a social media person. It's me. And I do use, there's Dan.
And
There's our other social media manager. Yeah. I do most of our stuff bespoke in Photoshop because I really want it to have a specific look and feel to it and to make it stand out a little bit. But I do our schedule drop in Canva because it's again the shit. It's Monday night. I haven't done a schedule drop. I don't want to get my laptop. I have my template, punch it in, done. And Dan uses Canva because he doesn't know Photoshop.
For us laymen's, Canva is everything.
Yeah, Photoshop's pretty hard to use. I know it like a very, very little bit, but not enough at all. So
Yeah, I'm also, my background is in marketing, and I would totally agree that if you're going to take on your own social media management, Canva is definitely the way to go, especially for a food business.
100%. And if I can just chime in real fast, like most of what we do, I just film crap around and what we're doing, what we're up to. Most of it has no really intent or like thought out process, but you just get the content and then figure it out later, put it all together. People like seeing behind the scenes. We get more interactions on the people than we do the food, which was depressing at first, but it's kind of heartwarming in the end. We just use TikTok to host video because it's a better editing software than Instagram. We don't have followership on TikTok. It doesn't move the needle as far as business or marketing goes, but it allows you a place to put all your videos and you can edit them so much more easily there and just upload them to other social media platforms from there. But I didn't even have these programs personally. I didn't use them or touch them until I started the food truck. So I have learned how to use those in like the last 2 years just by using them. And they're really not hard. I wasn't even trying. You just stumble across things and just kind of splice it together. But over time, people just really enjoy that from us and we try to give it back. But honestly, like with the other staff doing more in the kitchen, I've been able to devote more of my time to engagement, which has really helped. But I'm fortunate to have that.
I think actually the authenticity that Ironclad brings to the table is a really good example of kind of like how the market has shifted. Like a good advertisement for a food company isn't a television commercial anymore. It's really like it's someone that your target market really would want to sit down and have food with, not someone necessarily that's very corporate or something where there's not a face to it. And I think that's a really good example of how that can be successful.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, that's just put my media hat on for a second, but thank you everyone for joining us today. We hit our time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Nancy, Rue, and Steph. We really appreciate the input that you've had today, and we'll be sending out a recording of today's panel. So if anyone missed anything or they want to follow up, just keep an eye out for that email. Thanks for everyone today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
take care.